Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 159. Mark Grabin, transforming mistakes into positive outcomes and continuous improvement. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Mark Grabin. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Matt, thanks for having me.
So, Mark, you are an author, a speaker, a consultant, a podcaster. We just talked about a couple of your podcasts. You've been podcasting forever. Since 2006, I didn't even know there was podcasts back then.
Barely, and it was a different age. Yeah.
It's a different age. And you got a book out there called The Mistakes That Make Us. So you've done a lot, and you have a lot to talk about in terms of turning mistakes into a good thing. Mm-hmm. And especially in business, it's a really important thing to drive home, because there will be mistakes, and how you look at them is important. And not only you, but your whole team, organization, employees, and all that. So, well, the first thing we do on The Builders, especially when we have you on for the first time, is we like to learn a little bit about you, your story, your journey, your origin story, and what's influenced you. You know, what was that journey? What did that journey look like that got you to this place? Mm-hmm. To this, being this awesome person helping people out in the world. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Yeah. So thanks, Matt. You used a bunch of the labels that I would embrace, and I put them in my bio, but I'll kind of back up and maybe share some of the other steps and influences and labels. So engineer is, I guess, one of those labels. Industrial engineer. My career started off focused on maybe a different type of builders, people who built products. I started my career at General Motors. I didn't have aspirations to be part of a group of builders who were building a company, but we were trying to build improvements, trying to build culture that was better in some of those manufacturing companies. Mm-hmm. I would frame a lot of the work I've done using labels like continuous improvement. Back in the auto industry, that would have been called, maybe more specifically, the Toyota production system, which caused heartburn within General Motors. Like, you weren't supposed to mention Toyota. But 1995, it was pretty clear Toyota's doing things better. We need to learn from them. We need to catch up.
Right.
That's often then more broadly labeled as, at the time, lean manufacturing. More broadly, lean management. 2005, I guess, I would embrace the label consultant. I was hired by Johnson & Johnson, which had a consulting group that did work with hospitals and healthcare organizations. So that was a really interesting, detour. I didn't know, now, am I going to use the label healthcare person? Right. I thought, well, the worst. So when we talk about career mistakes, and I've interviewed a lot of people about their career mistakes, that could have been a mistake, taking that job to get out of my comfort zone in manufacturing. Turned out I wouldn't call it a mistake, but the worst, I asked myself, what's the worst that could happen? I could have probably gone back to a manufacturing company, even with the sad decline of manufacturing jobs in the US. But, working in healthcare was a really interesting opportunity to try to help organizations build a culture of continuous improvement, which is often, sadly, lacking in healthcare. There's the aspiration to have a culture of continuous improvement, but helping leaders and their teams turn that into a reality, is something I'm really passionate about. So that's been
my wife's in healthcare, so I kind of smile because I don't know if they have this continuous improvement thing going on. She's just a number. She's not treated too well, but
that's sad.
Yeah, it is sad. And she's like, it's that way everywhere. So
most everywhere.
Yeah.
But sadly, I would assume that to be the default unless proven otherwise.
Right.
Which it needs to be better in healthcare. But back to that point, and come back to my story if you want.
Yeah.
But like to drill into what your wife is saying, what people would say to me in 2005. People would complain that they don't get listened to, they don't feel respected, they're overworked, undersupported. They're not allowed to do things in the way they know leads to the best quality work. Like those are the exact same complaints from the frontline UAW production workers at my GM plant. People want to do quality work. People want and deserve to be listened to and supported and respected and to be part of a team. And it was burst a bit of a bubble. I guess my hypothesis coming into healthcare is that it would have been a better environment. And there's something sad. I mean, I think everyone deserves to be treated well, regardless of their position and education level. But in healthcare, everyone's leveled up in their formal education and degrees. But yet somehow
that doesn't translate to the management side of things. And
we fall into these same dynamics, and a lot of it, what might be true of like, the best engineer in a team gets made manager. They don't know anything about managing, and the company may or may not teach them how to be a good manager. The same kind of thing happens in healthcare, right? So it's really smart people who care deeply about what they do. Now they run the risk of getting burned out, which causes some problems, or just having. I make a parallel to, let's say, put together like think of the 1992 Olympics and the men's USA men's basketball dream team. Like they won the gold, but there are a lot of settings where you take all of the most super talented people and they can't win a game together.
Right.
Like this happens maybe more often in college basketball. You have a team of 5-star recruits and they all want to be the leading scorer and they can't win a game. So that environment, I know got sidetracked, but for your wife and for everyone else in healthcare, the culture challenge is still something that I'm trying to help people with and I'm still really passionate about. And that leads to things like books, podcasts, speaking, things that I do today, and a software company. So maybe we can come back and talk about that. A group of builders I work with are continuing to build a company called Kinexus, a software and technology platform that I've worked with. That's the second startup that I've been part of in my career.
Kinexus.
So I'll take the label entrepreneur too.
Kinexus. So how did you? What was that? So you were in manufacturing, and and why did you get out of manufacturing specifically to go into healthcare? Was it just you were not happy in your job, and then you went into?
That's a good question. So, and thanks for letting me kind of go back and touch on that. It wasn't a matter of running away from manufacturing or saying like, oh, manufacturing is in decline, let me go someplace else. I really, really enjoyed working in manufacturing. I worked at GM and Dell Computer and Honeywell. Were the three manufacturing companies I was with. It was really more a practical matter. My wife took a new job.
Gotcha.
That meant we had to move from Phoenix to the Dallas area. That put me on the job market. And the timing was really right with that opportunity at J&J.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
I need a job now, and it was there. And I thought, let me, sometimes timing and luck, matter. But I was willing to take a bit of a risk and try something new. Yeah,
you're still young yet. You take bigger risks.
Yeah, there's less to lose. It's not like I would be banned from ever setting foot in a factory again. Right.
Yeah. So then that led you to, how did you end up, like, what was your first business like that you, and why did you decide that was your path? What was the spark?
Yeah. Right. So I started my own business that I worked through back in 2010. And so one thing that really opened the opportunity to that. So at the time, 2009, 2010, again, we'd sort of moved. My wife had an opportunity to do grad school in Boston.
Okay.
And there was an organization there where I knew people, and what I thought might be closer collaboration turned into a job offer. It's called the Lean Enterprise Institute, nonprofit educational institute. I was working with them. But the one thing that kind of then opened up the path to working solo or working independent was the first book, that I wrote and had published back in 2008 called Lean Hospitals. So that, that book sold really well. There was a lot of exposure from that. And then, that led to kind of direct invitations, people reaching out to either do teaching, speaking, consulting, things like that. Now, back to like the question of career mistakes and what have you, going out on your own can be tough.
Yeah.
I think like, can I really pull this off? After working 1 year as a full-time W-2 employee of the Lean Enterprise Institute, we reached an agreement where I would scale back to being half-time, and then I would work on my own business.
Nice.
The other 50% of the time. So I've heard different pieces of advice of some people that say, you got to be all in, the kind of force, the hustle and the drive and not be falling back on this half paycheck, go build this. For me, that at least was my comfort level. And I think in that first year, kind of showed, well, okay, I think I'm making this work. And then coming into what would have been the third year of all of that, that's where I got introduced to the co-founders at KaiNexus. Mm-hmm. And then basically I said, okay, I'm going to leave the Lean Enterprise Institute. We weren't in Boston anymore. It wasn't quite the remote working era that we have now. So I basically shifted that other half time to be with KaiNexus, working with them. They were just coming to market with their product in 2011.
Interesting. Yeah, I've seen over the years, decades, I've seen different people approach that differently in terms of some people are more comfortable with just giving it all up and going, just putting it all in, put all your chips in
Right.
and hoping for the best. Right. But maybe you have a little bit of a runway. Maybe you don't. Maybe you got somebody that's supporting you. Certainly going all. But at the same time, I've seen people that come from larger companies or Fortune 500 companies, and they do this, kind of moonlighting for a while until they get an income where they're comfortable enough to now leave completely and do it. There's a lot of different ways. We're all different in what we can, right. And our responsibilities are all different too.
Yeah. And I'll thank my wife, who has a great career path, traditional employment. I don't need to, it would be a whole different dynamic if I was having a down quarter, if that was starting to put our mortgage on the line. It doesn't. If I had to go buy health insurance and I'm pretty fortunate that for the two of us together, it works well. And being in this mode, as opposed to ever, I'm maybe unemployable at this point, of a traditional job. We keep moving for her career, and the mode that I'm in doing these things just gives me a lot of flexibility that works well for the two of us.
That's actually huge. I mean, my wife would probably have preferred that I had a real job all these years, but but she's in healthcare. She's got the insurance. She's got she was the rock all these years, and when I had my the mistakes I made over the years that took me in the wrong direction financially. It's good to, So again, it's kind of unique to everybody's situation, but that is a nice, you gotta make that decision. So tell me a little bit about KaiNexus, a little bit more about that. So how did you meet these guys, and what was the attraction there, getting into that business?
Yeah. So I got introduced to the co-founder and CEO. He's still CEO today, Greg Jacobson. He's an ER doctor who kind of started KaiNexus a little bit, moonlighting. He and his wife are both ER doctors,
Gotcha.
And he still practices medicine. That's his part-time gig now compared to full-time CEO. But we got introduced by a mutual connection, another ER doctor who also was doing a lot of continuous improvement work. And he was correct in saying, you two would probably enjoy meeting each other. And I was in Dallas at the time. Greg is in Austin. So it wasn't too hard to meet up in person and to talk. And the appeal was a couple of things. So one, KaiNexus is a web-based SaaS platform, enterprise software that organizations use to manage continuous improvement. So there was that connection. I could understand, you think of like the problem statement of like, well, why this technology? Like I had lived through and really understood, I think pretty well, the customer perspective pretty directly and as a consultant to organizations that would benefit from KaiNexus. And then there's, the people side. Like the two co-founders, Greg and Matt, are just such earnest, honest, straightforward, people-focused people. So, at the time it was really the two of them, a part-time developer. I was part-time, and, we're trying to come to market, trying to sell, market, sell, support customers, keep customers, grow. We were pretty intentional of talking from the beginning of, if we are providing software to support customers in their continuous improvement work, we at KaiNexus are going to develop and cultivate a culture of continuous improvement. So there was a lot of alignment there. And now as the company's grown to about 50 people, I think that foundation and being intentional about culture is one of the real keys to KaiNexus not just surviving, but thriving. And, there are stories from KaiNexus in the book, The Mistakes That Make Us. So I think of, what the leaders do, as you brought up earlier, Matt, just how do we learn from mistakes, not just as an individual, but as an organization? I think KaiNexus does really well in that regard. That's awesome. So that connection, still really solid today. And it's a part-time role that's evolved in different ways over time. Thankfully, we grew to where we could hire people who know what they were doing instead of me trying to figure out these different things. So thankfully, we got the ship up, we got the plane off the ground, and we could hire people that keep the plane flying and flying better.
That's the fun part about building a business, is, well, the challenging part and the fun part at the same time. Depends on how you look at it. In the beginning, you're wearing a lot of hats. You're the guy or the gal that has to know or try to do or learn as you go, learn as you go. Yeah. And then, but there's a point where you reach where, okay, I finally can get somebody that is better than me.
But, thankfully, we haven't, I don't know what CEO we would find to be better for KaiNexus in a lot of ways, but I'll give Greg credit. He admits mistakes. He leads by example. That filters down through the culture. And the purpose of admitting a mistake is not to shame yourself or to be ridiculed. It's for learning and improvement and prevention of the repeat of mistakes. Greg is really good that way. And, he did something at one point that a lot of entrepreneurs really might not want to do. Like, we had an angel investor advisory member who was actually at one point the CEO of the first software startup I worked for. Alan was not the founder, but basically got brought in by the venture capital investors at the time after the founder, and then a second CEO had been fired. So Alan and Greg took him up on this opportunity. I forget if Alan kind of suggested or Greg asked. There was a period of about 18 months where Alan actually stepped in as CEO and Greg became chief product officer. But he didn't let his ego, get in the way, because the company's not about him. Like, he, I think, really took in the mentorship from Alan. And, if Greg were on with you, or maybe I can introduce you, you could hear it from him directly. Greg's a better CEO. He would have been a good CEO, but he was a first-time builder, a first-time entrepreneur. So thankfully, he was willing to learn, and he's a better CEO because of Alan's mentoring.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have this thread, continuous improvement, going through everything. And obviously in this case, the decision to bring somebody else in CEO position and stuff, that was a risk. And that was something that could have been a mistake. But we do,
could have been. You never know.
Yeah.
So,
But you do these things because you want to improve. And like I said, can't let your ego get in the way. You got to try different things and let others take the helm sometimes. And I love that through this whole thread, from your manufacturing all the way through everything you've done, there's been this continuous improvement. Something's attracting you to that. That's become your thing. Yeah. And what do you think it is about that? Do you think it's something that is in you, that, it's in your DNA, that you see this as kind of an underlying thing in all organizations, all things in life, that we need to learn continuous improvement and that mistakes are okay? Is that something that's...
It's a question, a good question. Is it nature or nurture, including workplace nurturing? I mean, there are certainly some influences that shaped my views and beliefs and passion around a lot of this. I'll come back to that in a minute, but I mean, I do believe very strongly that everybody has the ability to help improve their work. That people doing work, whether it's assembling car engines or writing software or providing nursing care to patients, they are the experts in their work. And I think people, regardless of formal education level or the level of training they've had in continuous improvement, everyone's got the ability to contribute and participate. And I think there's an inherent need, a desire, but sadly it more often gets drummed out of people, right? Because people start a career or start a job, they might ask questions like, well, why do we do things this way? I think a healthy organization encourages and embraces those questions. A dysfunctional organization shuts people down by saying, well, you're new here. What do you know?
Right.
This is how we've always done it. Shut up, basically. Right. Where I've got an idea, I think it could be better. And they're told directly or in one way or another, shut up, or they get politely ignored, and people learn not to speak up. And then sometimes leaders, I think, draw the wrong conclusions. Like a pet peeve of mine is if, let's say there's a survey, people may just have a sense of like, our employees are not highly engaged. What the hell's wrong with them? Like that's not the right question to ask. It's more, you almost need to look in the mirror and say, what did we do to them? And stop blaming the employees for their lack of engagement, their lack of participation, what have you. So I think some of the key influences in a nutshell are, people from the Toyota methodology and management philosophy. Even though I started my career at GM, I had mentors who had opportunities to learn directly from Toyota and work with them or Toyota suppliers. So I had some great influences there. Another influence who I never met, but because of my dad's 40-year career at General Motors as an engineer, W. Edwards Deming, who passed away 30 years ago. But Dr. Deming was so influential in creating what some would call the modern quality movement, not just in the United States but around the world. So Dr. Deming and his management philosophy around continuous improvement and leadership was directly influential on Toyota after World War II, and then eventually the rest of the world in the 80s, started paying more attention to him. So those are a couple of key influences, both direct and indirect. And I would also credit other former Toyota people that I've gotten to work with and collaborate over the last 15 years.
And it just really made an impression on you, and that kind of just carried forward. You started seeing that opportunity everywhere to improve. So is there a relationship between, and we really didn't define what lean management is, but is there a relationship between lean management and continuous improvement? What's that relationship?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, people could be practicing continuous improvement independently of any of the other lean methodologies or jargon or lingo. But continuous improvement is one of the core pieces of lean manufacturing. So I would say you could do continuous improvement without lean. If you're labeling what you're doing as lean, it had better have continuous improvement as a part of it. So Toyota has a number of frameworks that they use and language that they use. One way would be to look at dual pillars of continuous improvement, and then what Toyota calls respect for people, or sometimes gets translated into English as respect for humanity. But it's really those two pieces together, right? They go hand in hand. You're not going to get a lot of continuous improvement if you're forcing improvement on people, if you're bullying them into participating. It really goes hand in hand that we are driven to have a culture of continuous improvement in part because we respect our employees, we respect our customers, we respect our suppliers and the community. But then we get more improvement happening by respecting and engaging people in a very collaborative way. So Toyota would talk a lot about trust, mutual trust, and respect as, a core of their philosophy. So you could look to other non-Toyota based influences, perhaps Stephen Covey.
Okay.
The Venn diagram of Covey principles and Toyota principles would probably have a high degree of overlap as well.
Okay. So you talk about respect, and what is that in terms of continuous improvement? So is the respect in like listening to your people or making it? Go ahead.
That's part of it. Yeah. It goes like, so sometimes people hear about respect and they think that means like, oh, that means being nice. I'm like, well, I mean, it doesn't mean being a jerk, but like there's more to it than being, let's say, superficially nice. So Toyota uses another word in relation to, when they talk about respect, continuous improvement, trust, they use the word challenge. Sometimes a leader shows respect by challenging people, right? So this doesn't mean rolling over and doing whatever your employees say. You can have healthy, constructive, respectful debate. You can challenge people to do better because they have it in them, right? And working together as a team. So, you think of parallels to sports coaches, music teachers. I mean, I only got on a football field because of marching band and playing drums for 8 years. But I had
a little of that myself. Trombone,
marching band or
trombone.
Yeah. Oh, trombone. Yeah. Like there's, I think I had a lot of great examples of leadership there. A good leader will push you where sometimes you don't really like that leader.
Right.
You might say, come on, this is good enough. Back off. We're fine. But then when you accomplish more than you would have otherwise, then you appreciate it. And you're like, well, they did have our best interests in mind.
In hindsight.
And whether it's a marching band or a football team or a hospital or manufacturing, you've got to have, I think of Covey, of win-win situations or win-win-win-win. Like, in healthcare, I try to preach for what it's worth. Continuous improvement or lean, and this is something Toyota taught me, it needs to be good in no particular order. Good for the patients, good for the healthcare providers and staff and employees. It needs to be good for the organization, for their financial stability and ability to continue and thrive and grow. There's got to be that mutual benefit. It's not about exploiting. It wouldn't be in the spirit of continuous improvement to force people to improve so we can exploit that for the benefit of the company.
Right.
That wouldn't be the lean mindset that really kind of comes from Toyota or Deming or others.
Yeah. I think, and I think about it the same way with my team, and I have an international team, and we have. I'm always trying to find ways to help them improve and contribute, and challenging them, even from a documentation perspective, right? I had somebody recently where they did something, they solved something related to databases, this nerd stuff. They had to move a database. It was tricky. It was big. It was this whole thing. And I had never had them document anything before. I said, can you document what you just did there? And it was a little hesitation. But they finally did, just showed me what they did, and we got that documented. But it was one of those things where I'm challenging that person to, or I'll challenge, somebody else to, think about a problem and come up with solutions themselves. Instead of me trying, I got my own ideas around that problem. Maybe, what do you think? That type of thing. I think that's what I'm hearing is helpful in any organization. To do that.
Yeah, it's got to be collaborative, right? So one way an attempt at continuous improvement would break down is if leaders tell the employees, I want you to report all your problems up to me or us, and we will solve them for you. Like that doesn't work. It's got to be collaborative. Now, leaders can't take that all on themselves. They also can't dump all of the world's problems on the frontline staff either. Like probably 80% of things can really be solved at the frontline level, but there are certain systemic problems or policy related decisions that frontline staff can't directly influence. So there's this balance of you need people to escalate issues when they need help, but that can't be 100% of issues. And leaders can make suggestions, but depending on the culture and, you have to be careful about that because people might just say, okay, yeah, yes, boss, we'll do your thing. And then they might keep quiet about their idea that might have been
well. One
better.
of my problems is actually getting somebody to ask for help.
Yeah.
In my organization. So yeah, and that's something where, and I try to create that culture where they can come to me and I can help them. And it's like this back and forth. And when you need me, try it, go after this problem. If you need help though, you can ask this other team member or ask me or, so with that though too, now, and let's get to the mistake side of things. I think, now I'm in web development, web design, obviously bugs happen all the time. Mm-hmm. We have a whole QA person. That's their whole job. That's to find bugs.
Right.
And, but that's something too, that where it's kind of part of what we're doing. And it's a normal part of business for things to us to make mistakes. Or something, somebody rolled something out and there was another bug or they missed something or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I always feel it's how kind of my job not to react to that and scold that person. Right. It's to like I read a little bit of your book and your background and stuff like this, talking about mistakes and all that, but it's about, and I think you mentioned this, and one thing I was reading from you is basically, you're not scolding somebody for making a mistake. You're like, what can we learn from that, right? And making it a positive thing. So mistakes can be positive. You learn from it. Obviously, we don't want to repeat that mistake every week. Hopefully, we learn from it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's a balance again to be found where we can acknowledge that the mistake had a bad impact. We don't have to love the mistake. We should love the learning and the improvement. And, there's, I think, these sometimes deeply ingrained assumptions in organizations where, I've heard people say, well, so-and-so made a mistake. I mean, we have to punish them or otherwise that's just giving people permission to make more mistakes. And I'm like, that's a really grim view of the world, like, or your team. Like,
get the belt out.
Yeah, I mean, if threat of punishment worked, then mistakes wouldn't happen. But threat of punishment doesn't work because mistakes are, by definition, unintentional.
Yeah.
Like sometimes in the healthcare literature, I stumble across this phrase, unintended mistakes. I'm like, that's so redundant if you step back and think about it, right? Intentional bad acts have other words like sabotage, right? So if somebody is intentionally sabotaging things, that's probably rare, that would be addressed differently. But, when you punish and people say we have to punish, like it's a choice, right? People don't want to make mistakes. People don't want to repeat mistakes. People generally, they feel bad about their mistakes. So punishment really doesn't help. And I've just heard so many stories of a company firing a person for a mistake and they do nothing else to address the underlying causes of said mistake. Right. And I can see by looking at your face, where this is going. It's a matter of time before somebody else repeats the same mistake. And what are you going to do? Fire them?
Well, that's the thing, right? You have to self-analyze, right? You have to, is it something I'm doing? Is it something that that they need to learn? Maybe they're not as good at this thing as I thought they were, and they're missing some skills, or maybe they're not right for that position or that particular task.
Could be. Right. So if we hired badly or we trained badly, those are systemic problems. Yeah. Those are organizational problems. And then, you say, well, but we need to hold people accountable. Well, who are we holding accountable? Are we holding the person who is maybe in some ways victim of those circumstances?
Yeah, you put them in that circumstance, right?
Are we holding accountable the person who designed said system or manages said system? So I think like the blaming and punishment response is, I think, a human evolutionary trait for survival and rising through the ranks. And I think, that's very deeply in our DNA. I don't mean to sound so cynical about it, but I think we have to recognize, like, if you could get someone else to take the blame for your mistake and they got killed, like, you survive. Like,
Yeah.
So in our modern world, though, it might not be a matter of life and death. It might be a matter of corporate survival. And if leaders can get away with blaming their employees or blaming somebody else, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's understandable. And, we should try to guard against that or look out for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of and I work with other agencies and partnerships and stuff, and where I've just met a lot of people over the years that have, and this is just to tie this in. This is, when you go out to find a contractor, somebody to do work for you, right? And they might work with an international team or somebody out there. And I hear a lot of nightmare stories where it's like, I hate working with these people. I never have any success with this, outsourcing in this way or whatever. And a lot of it, I feel like, from my experience and positive experiences, that I think a lot of it boils down to communication and the expectations we have of people. And so it kind of still lies on us, like how we interacted with them, how, a lot of times in those cases, because you're working with an outside team, there's not as much structure and understanding of what each party's doing or each, so
Sure.
There's so many other things that could be a problem there. So what other things can we, I love continuous improvement. I've been talking about continuous improvement for since the 2000s, I think. I don't know where I learned it. It was something, Kaizen, obviously, means continuous improvement, I think, in Japanese, right?
Japanese, yep. Kaizen,
Kaizen. I've probably been pronouncing it wrong all
That's
this.
how I mostly
But it's something I preach myself in whether content or talking to my team once in a while and stuff. And so it's really interesting to hear somebody that's like that your whole life is dedicated to that. What other lessons can we learn in terms of making mistakes when you talk about making it part of your culture? Like what are the key things that you should, how do you implement that? Like, where do you start?
Yeah. Well, so first off, what doesn't work is just demanding that people be honest about mistakes. Speak up, be candid. There's a really important foundation to any of this that people call psychological safety. And psychological safety is really this, to me, this individual feeling or belief that I can speak up about things without getting in trouble. So earlier, you talked about asking for help. That would be one thing. In some organizations, people get in trouble for that, right? So your culture, Matt, is influenced a little bit by the places your employees used to work.
Yes.
And if they had it ingrained in them,
oh my gosh, yeah,
asking for help leads to a smart ass response.
Yeah, just to pause for a second. So I have had employees, and in fact, I'm thinking of one right now where she said, she's like, I'm the best boss ever. Like she must have gotten yelled at constantly at her previous workplaces, and talked down to or whatever. And so it's out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So people learn for good reason to be afraid of speaking up. And that can include admitting mistakes, saying, I don't know, bringing forward an idea, like these things. And I would say, just to make it binary, a bad culture, and there's degrees of culture, but in a bad culture, speaking up gets punished or has negative consequences in some way. So psychological safety is really about leaders setting the tone. And I don't think it helps to lecture people to say things like, well, you should be brave. We need you to be more courageous. You should speak up. Like that doesn't work. What does work, and I think I mentioned about Greg earlier as CEO of Kinexus, when leaders model some of these behaviors, like saying, I was wrong, I made a mistake, I don't know, I could be wrong, so let's go test that idea. Like these are, I think, are really healthy things to say. Modeling those behaviors is more effective than telling people that they should act a certain way. People are going to follow the lead of their leader and leaders. So modeling those behaviors is key. And then when people then convince themselves, okay, I can do the same thing. Greg admitted a mistake, so I can admit a mistake. Leaders need to reward those behaviors, right? So it goes beyond a little bit more than don't punish. Like I think there's got to be an enthusiasm for people speaking up, even if that means if they're disagreeing with you, if they're challenging you. Psychological safety is something that can be cultivated and developed over time. And it really has more to do with what leaders do compared to what they say. Like I think encouraging people to speak up is only helpful if you react constructively when people do speak up.
Right.
So then that's the foundation that allows people to speak up about things, including mistakes. And then when we combine that psychological safety with effective problem solving, then we're actually moving forward in a way where people say, okay, well, I spoke up about that problem. We figured it out together. That problem doesn't happen anymore. That's good. And that feels good. And that provides more encouragement then for that positive cycle to begin with. So we're trying to address the final thing I'll say to this around building a culture. I like to cite and give credit to Professor Ethan Burris at the University of Texas, Austin, and the business school there, who's done great research about why employees choose to not speak up. And I think that's an important way of phrasing it. They are choosing not to speak up. People need to protect themselves in a dangerous environment, right? The two reasons people don't speak up are either fear, I think we've touched on that already, or futility. Where in some workplaces, people say, I'm not afraid to speak up. It's just
Nothing
not
ever
worth
happens.
the effort.
Yeah.
Nothing ever happens, right? So what we don't want is leaders continually reacting well to the same mistakes over and over again.
That's not good.
That's not taking us forward.
Yeah.
So to address the fear factor and the futility factor, we need psychological safety and problem solving. It goes hand in hand.
That is huge. And again, to use hopefully my wife won't get in trouble. No one knows where she works. but
Right.
But it's the same. We have this conversation. She gets so frustrated because there's a piece of what you just said missing. It's the futility of reporting issues and speaking about problems because nothing ever changes.
Right. And then you think about it for half a second. You're like, well, of course people would stop trying to speak up. And now they're just trying to survive the day. And I think we all aspire to be in a better position than just survive.
Yeah, and you have employees that, like my wife, she truly cares about her work and the quality of her work and showing up every day and working hard. But then she sees other people not working hard. She sees all the things I hear every day. But again, but nothing changes. That it's like in this culture that she's wrapped up in, well, she sees, so I have, obviously partnerships and things like that. And she sees things, and she's even been to events with my partners where, whether it's a holiday or whatever it is. And she's like, she just can't, she's beside herself, like how amazing these relationships are and how we interact and get together and collaborate and all this stuff. Like she doesn't get that. And I think it's probably missing in a lot of workplaces. That type of feeling.
It sadly is, and that could be in a hospital or a factory or a software company or a store or what have you. But back to the real quick around the situation of well, some people aren't working really hard. I always kind of think back to, again, was that a hiring mistake, or did the organization maybe do that to them, right? So one of my favorite expressions, I wish it was a cliche that was better known. If you're complaining about all of the dead wood in the organization, ask yourself why you hired live trees and killed them? Did you not hire live trees, right? If you're hiring people who don't want to work, you need to fix your hiring process. I think it's more likely people get burned out or discouraged, and they're not in a place where they can put their all into it anymore. So look, sometimes, I'd look and say, some people have, here's how I would frame it. These aren't bad employees. You look at it and say, what has our organization done to these people? They are irreparably damaged in some cases. Give them a nice package to leave, and then figure out how to not repeat that cycle in the future.
But you have to have somebody that cares to do that. Or maybe I feel like, from what I hear, is sometimes how I interpret it is it's easier to keep them than to do that, to get, hire a whole new person and go through all that. And maybe they don't even have the mechanism in place they don't even know what they did wrong in the first place
Sure. And sometimes that takes some deeper cultural assessment and willingness. It comes back to this, taking responsibility versus trying to blame others. I mean, how long would a coach last in the NFL if they were just constantly dumping on, well, let me use college as an example. A college coach just constantly dumping on their players who are terrible. Yeah. Like, well, wait a minute. You recruited them. That's part of your job. If you have a team full of terrible players, that's probably your fault. And if they're not executing well or don't care or whatever, like, you can't, even with the transfer portal now, you can't, I used to say, you can't fire all the players. Maybe you need to replace the coach. Deion Sanders came in and basically fired a lot of the players at Colorado, not to get too sidetracked into that. But, I think back to, again, like, if you've, in healthcare, a lot of times people have been executives for a very long time. And then I try to be understanding, they find it threatening when you start challenging the culture, and they think, well, that's kind of if you're criticizing the culture, you're criticizing.
Right. It goes to the top.
And sometimes, honestly, you need a coaching change to have any real hope of change in the culture, to bring someone in who's not going to be defensive about how things got to be the way they are today.
Right. We need a real shakeup. So what do you, so you are doing, let's go back to your story for a second. Okay. So what are you doing today? You're coaching, you're obviously got the business. How are you helping? Well, obviously you're doing coaching, you got the podcast, you got all this stuff going on.
Yeah. So, there's, I guess, direct and indirect ways. So, things like books and podcasts and webinars, help people that I'm not really directly interacting with, but I do a range of things, back to those different labels. Speaking engagements for organizations, industry associations, things like that. A little bit deeper dive within an organization might be considered training or education. Working with people relatively small amounts over time might be considered coaching. And then there might be times when I would come in and do something deeper that we might consider a consulting project. But, I think I love working with organizations where there's overlap on and passion around working on these two PSs, not just problem solving, but also psychological safety. So there's some certification I've gotten where I'm licensed to do a formal psychological safety survey for organizations, and to help leaders interpret the results of those surveys, learn from it, and put together an action plan around improving the culture of psychological safety. So then that leads into some coaching and education and working with people. So I got capabilities. For the longest time, it was really teaching and coaching that problem-solving PS. It's really in the last 4 years, I wish I'd learned these things sooner, where I really had my eyes open to the other PS of psychological safety.
So do you like working with individuals, or like full organizations, like getting really like larger businesses, smaller businesses? What type of people do you like to work with?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the scale of coaching individuals or working on larger projects or initiatives. I do work, and I've been increasing the amount of work that I do with organizations, again, back outside of healthcare. So I'm not running away from healthcare any more than I was running away from manufacturing. But I'm fortunate to have learned some things, and including the startup experiences, where I could come back into larger or mid-sized manufacturing companies. I think there are things that I can teach and coach people on that are relevant to companies at various stages of building, whether that's startups or now what a lot of people are calling scale-ups. I think KaiNexus is in that category of scale up, meaning like startup, I think real quick, startup is trying to discover a business model that's sustainable for your products and services. So developing the product and developing the business model. And then once you've kind of got that locked in pretty well, I mean, things need to evolve and improve. Once you've got that figured out, now your focus is on scaling something that you've pretty well already figured out.
Oh, I'm a scale up and didn't even know it.
Yeah, I mean that's a phrase I only learned maybe in the last 2 years, because like when the company's been around and on the market for 12 plus years, like we're a small high growth company.
Right.
I mean, we were a startup,
and
really
scale up. I mean, it still could be day one. It'd be like an Amazon thing. It's always day one. You're always starting up.
Yeah. Look, and again, being a scale up doesn't mean you've gotten arrogant of like, oh, we have all our stuff figured out. Yeah. But you have enough figured out to feel like, I mean, it could be a mistake to start scaling something that's the wrong idea.
True.
We've seen that happen in some really, big newsworthy flameouts from the .com era and more recently. But yeah, I mean, I like working with organizations in different industries. It's really more about like finding alignment on the problems that we're trying to solve, and
a lot of those problems are like what you can learn in manufacturing and healthcare and stuff that can be applied and translate to almost any type of business, I would imagine. Yeah. So, Mark, it was great having you on the show. If somebody wants to reach out to you, they want to find you, where do you live on the World Wide Web? You got a website? Are you hanging out somewhere like LinkedIn or something?
Yeah. It's funny to say the World Wide Web. That takes me back 30 years. You can find me on the World Wide Web at
https://
Well, nowadays, I was in my time machine. People can find me markgraban.com, Graban. My name's unique enough they could just Google my name, nice. Mark Grabin. The book's website is mistakesbook.com. The podcast is mistakespodcast.com. And then social media wise, LinkedIn is really kind of the main place where I spend a little time, and I can be found and followed there.
Yes, I'll be following you. I'm there. That's one of my hangouts.
So let's connect. I mean, this has been fun, Matt. I appreciate the questions and prompting here.
Yes, it's been fun. Well, thanks a lot, Mark. Until next time.
All right. Thanks a lot.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.